Hi everyone, my name is Zuk Avraham and I'm the co-founder and CEO of ZecOps. Today I'll be giving the talk on the state of mobile security at Hack in the Box 2021 in Amsterdam. This is the keynote presentation. I'm very excited to do that. I've always had a great pleasure attending Hack in the Box and speaking at Hack in the Box. So this is a very special event for me. I spoke the first time in Hack in the Box, I think it was 2011. And I love the event ever since. The team was just spectacular. And I really love the attention to details, the great quality of presentations, and the entire Hack in the Box team and Dylan himself are just amazing. So really happy to be giving this talk. Let me share the screen and we'll get started. So today we'll be speaking about the state of mobile security. My background before we get started. I live in San Francisco, originally from Israel, moved here about 6 years ago. And I wish I could do this talk in person, but I guess only next year we'll be able to do that. And I've been doing security research my entire life, and I've been focusing on mobile security ever since I joined Samsung back in 2010. And at the time, I was working on hacking smart devices, smart TVs, smartphones, and I've been given the opportunity of proving that ARM devices at the time with new mitigations were still hackable. But they also gave me the opportunity of writing full exploits and even publishing some of this research at conferences like DEF CON and Black Hat. Afterwards, I founded Zimperium, and in 2017, I co-founded ZecOps. I like everything related to cybersecurity, mobile DFIR in particular. I also am enjoying chess and cookings. So this is my email and my Twitter. Some of you know me as iHackBanMe on Twitter. All right, so let's get started. This is a very important topic. It's a topic that is I've been giving a lot of energies for, and I watched it very closely over the years. So hopefully I can share some of my experience and what I'm seeing, as well as maybe some heads up on what's coming into endpoints and servers, if we don't react now as a community together. It's all known on how smartphones are important for us, but just to put things in perspective, there are 3 billion users out there using mobile devices, about 3 billion. These devices have microphone, they have cameras, they have access to our emails, our SMSs, and our most sensitive data, videos, pictures, contacts, and whatnot. They're always on us, they're always connected. They expose quite a big attack surface from remote, I mean, just look everywhere. People are always on their phones. And I think very important to mention that it's being used as our second factor. So as an attacker, if an attacker attacks your PC, they still need to hack your phone or find a way to receive the second factor of authentication. But if they hack your phone, they don't need to hack anything else. So this is really becoming the most important target to protect, but it is also the biggest target with the least amount of visibility that we have. But always it came back to that. Oh, but I have walled garden and I'm protected. I'm not downloading from third-party app store, so I'm protected. That's actually not the real threat if you're dealing with actors like NSO and other commercial groups, as well as nation states. But really, it became more intense for me in 2017, the summer of 2017. So I just walked around in New York, and I noticed that my phone suddenly rebooted. And as a security researcher, I know that this could happen for multiple reasons. One of them could be a kernel panic. It could also happen when you click accidentally on the power button. It could also happen when the device is overheated. But I wasn't clicking on the power button. The device wasn't too hot in any significant way. And I realized that I just experienced a kernel panic on my phone. Now, kernel panic on the phone doesn't necessarily have to be because of security reasons. But in this particular case, once I looked at the logs, I noticed that it happened because of a security mitigation that was triggered. 99.9% of the people would never actually check the kernel logs whenever something like that happens. But this is where I really took a deeper dive into the rabbit hole of what smartphones security really means and how big the gap is that we have to close ASAP for this entire planet. I mean, 3 billion is a very big amount of device owners compared to the entire population of planet Earth. So we really have to do something about it. So I took a deeper dive into this kernel panic. It was a security mitigation that was triggered. And it basically panicked when the kernel expected a certain value in what iOS kernel calls non-poison cookie, but it actually seen a different value. It was 1 bit difference than the expected value and the current value at the time. And as a result of that, the kernel protected itself and rebooted. Interestingly enough, this mitigation only runs once every 32 allocations. So as an attacker, your exploit would work 31 out of 32 times, and that's an acceptable risk. But this is only 1 bit that flipped. So, I mean, it could happen for other reasons. It could happen because of memory corruption. It's possible. It could also happen because of cosmic rays. One researcher suggested that. You can actually calculate that. It's very low probability, but it's possible. Knowing what I do and knowing, the things I've been involved in and all the stories about researchers getting targeted, it wasn't unexpected to see that. So I did take a deeper dive, and it definitely looked suspicious, but I couldn't conclude what's going on. Part of that was because I was blocked from analyzing my own device, but really 2 weeks later, what happened was that my phone panicked again. This time I was at DEF CON 2017. The taxi driver took a different route, and as soon as I exited airplane mode, because during the conference I was in airplane mode, the phone panicked. I immediately looked at the kernel logs, and I noticed, and my eyes went dark. Basically, I noticed that the baseband binary, in this particular case, Com Center Mobile Helper, was running an unsigned version of it. So this is why the kernel panicked. It ran a CS ops operation, and it failed on this particular process. So at that point, I was really curious what's going on. Is my phone compromised? And because the kernel gave me this path to this file, this Com Center Mobile Helper, that was replaced and wasn't the expected signed executable that the kernel wanted to see, I wanted to extract that file. It's very simple. So when I tried to do it in traditional ways, I couldn't do it. When I asked the vendor to provide me file system dump, they didn't want to commit, not on the time, not on what I'll get, and not on anything. They did, however, offer me a free device, but I wasn't interested in a free device. I was interested in the attack. I was interested in the details. I was interested in what's happening on my own phone and who attacked me, and I wanted them to pay for doing that. So I needed a local privilege escalation exploit. And Google Project Zero happened to have, they have announced, or I was told that they're about to release this local privilege escalation exploit for that particular version of iOS. And so I asked, I basically begged Ben Hawks from Google Project Zero to provide me access to that file because I'm running out of time. I know that threat actors are using time bombs, which we'll discuss later. And if I'm not going to do it fast enough, I'm going to lose my opportunity to discover this attack. A few weeks later, Google Project Zero did actually release it. Ben Hawks didn't want to share with me the LP while at that point in time. I understand. I mean, people don't always want to share their local privilege escalations, but I was basically blocked from analyzing my own device. I was blocked from analyzing the specific file the kernel told me that was tampered with, So I was blocked, and this is where I really took a deeper dive into what's really happening in mobile security. Because if I was attacked, how many other people are attacked? I mean, I'm not that important. I'm not important. There are people way more important than me with access to many things. I'm actually not using my phone to access anything important. So why was I targeted? And how many other people are targeted? How many people viewing this presentation are actively targeted? So that's what I wanted to check. The answer actually scared me more than I anticipated. I didn't know how common it is. Now I do know it's very common. It's not as common as like 50% of the population, but if you're doing something of importance, you're definitely targeted one way or the other by one threat actor or the other. So what's the problem? The problem with mobile security is that phones are very limited in what you can see. So if you think about it, it was originally, or at least marketed as privacy solutions. So Uber, for example, cannot see if Lyft is installed on your device and then offer you more competitive rates, which, by the way, I mean, that will be not bad if we get more competitive rates, if they know it was installed on the device. But let's put that aside and let's assume that's actually a good thing. So if Uber cannot see Lyft, can our antiviruses see malware or other applications that exist on the device? The answer is not. But as a result of privacy, we cannot make sure that our phone is private. And that's really a problem. We'll talk about that later. And also one of the other issues is in our computers, in our Macs, in our servers, in Linux, we have local admins, root user. Why don't we have the same on our mobile? Why don't we have the same type of access on our smartphone? So this is really something I want to change. This is something that we deserve as 2 to 3 billion people that have smartphones. We have to change that because of what these devices include: microphone, camera, and our second factor of authentication. And for some people, even large amount of cryptocurrencies. We should have the ability of inspecting these devices. But really, when I wanted to check for myself, like, how bad is it? Like, how common it is to see acknowledgements from vendors that they're under attack. I mean, obviously they prefer not to acknowledge at all, and we'll see that shortly. But when they actually acknowledge that there were attacks, there are a few things that are very similar. For example, they say this may be under limited and targeted exploitation. What do you mean targeted and limited? Was it 5 people? Was it 5,000? Was it 50,000? Was it 500,000 or 5 million users? I mean, with 1 billion devices out there, you can say 5 million is very targeted and very limited exploitation. These 4 vulnerabilities specifically fixed in the May update in Android, they allow attacker to gain full access to the device, and the attackers actually get higher privileges than what you get as the device owner. And we have to level that up. We have to make sure that we get the same access as the attackers. Otherwise, we are fighting an uphill battle, and we have to correct that. Now, before I continue, you may think to yourself, hey, this guy is doing mobile stuff. He wants higher privileges for his own good. But you actually couldn't be more wrong about it. I'm not doing it for myself. I probably have better access than the majority of the people doing mobile security research. I have access to LPs. I have access to things that are not available to most of the people out there. The problem, and if we actually share this, if we actually receive this access, I'll be equal. I'll be on par with everyone else. It will give them to be on the same level as my access. So in a way, I'll not have this huge advantage anymore. But I'm not looking at it like that. I'm not looking at it as, okay, I'll be with the same level of access as company X or Y. I'm looking at it as, this is what's important for the industry. This is what's important for every SOC in the world. This is what's important for every politician that wants to keep their democracy. This is what's important for every prime minister or every VIP or journalist or researcher that wants to make sure that their phone is not compromised. And if they are compromised, to make sure that the attackers pay for making these mistakes, attacking them, so extracting these payloads. Even for the attackers, if you are working for a government and you work for a commercial group, this access is actually good for you because same attacker, like you are attacking others, people attack you. So your phone is compromised probably too. And not being able to analyze it properly, that's a really big problem. So this is how I look at things. I want to make sure that everyone gets equal access, the same level of access that the attacker gets. We have to level it up. And there are also other problems that LPs do not solve. They actually cause some issues, especially when dealing with at-scale deployments and when dealing with non-persistent attacks. So we'll cover also these too. And this is why I actually I don't recommend using LPs for investigations and prefer to convince the vendors to do otherwise, to do the good decision and actually open up local admin rights for users. Let's continue. So this is from January 2021. Again, another vulnerability. It may be under limited, targeted exploitation. Okay, great. Only 4 months apart. And then I just saw yesterday, Dan from Ars Technica actually wrote that it's a bit of odd to write this this meaningless sentence in each one of the vulnerabilities that were exploited in the wild. I mean, you want to give us details? Give us details. Give us the IOCs. Give us the CNC servers. Give us the path that the malware used. Give us more information about the exploits. More information about the vulnerabilities. You give us the number. How many were targeted? And I honestly don't necessarily believe these numbers anymore. I don't believe the limited and targeted exploitation, just like I didn't believe Google when they said that stage fright was not exploited. I actually knew that it was exploited in the wild. I mean, even in our demos, once we demonstrated it, we attacked many devices for demonstration purposes. How can they say it wasn't exploited in the wild? Like, how would they know if our demo was a real attack or not? I mean, we got a shell on the target device, and we've demonstrated that it was infected as a result of stage fright. So how can they say that it wasn't exploited? And also on top of that, some commercial threat actors told me that as a result of stage fright being patched, they actually lost some vulnerabilities that they were using. So I know for a fact that it was exploited in the wild. And I also know, as a result of this, that Google, and we can also infer that Apple, do not have real statistics on attacks whenever the attackers are preventing them from seeing those statistics. So this is one of the biggest problems in the mobile world. When you have a single barrier of defense, once the attackers bypass that, they just make sure that the vendor cannot see that anymore. And as a result of that, they're completely invisible to the vendor. And by the way, while many of my examples will speak about iOS or Android, I'm not referring to any specific vendor. I think this is a problem in Apple, this is a problem in Google, in Samsung, in LG, in anyone else. This is a problem in the entire industry, and we have to change that, the level of access that we have. Let's take a look at iOS. So here, there is a Google tag discovery, and they have basically found an attack that was exploited in the wild. Here it doesn't mention that it was exploited in the wild, but it was. And that's a bit of unfortunate, but let's see how it goes in other disclosures. So this was 12.1.4. Now we're skipping to future versions, most recent versions. 14.2. They say this exploit for this issue exists in the wild. Somebody was exploiting kernel vulnerabilities on iOS devices, but we don't have IOCs. We don't have the URLs. We don't have the paths. We don't have any report. We don't know how many people were attacked using these vulnerabilities. Where is the transparency? Like, we also know that Apple didn't really notify Xcode Ghost infected devices about it. They just put it in a FAQ page that nobody reads. So were those people notified about these attacks? Share with us something else. Share with us more information. Now, iOS 14.4, same thing. It says that Apple is aware that this issue may have been actively exploited. It may have been actively exploited. Like, I don't know. It's very, very vague. Anonymous researcher, is that like a government? Is that something else? But a kernel bug and WebKit bug, I mean, it's always a recipe for trouble. So it allows remote code execution to attackers. But here again, no report, no IOCs, nothing. Not even how many devices were attacked. iOS 14.5. So we continue. Again, this issue is exploited in the wild. Pretty good amount of discoveries recently that have that. But here again, no report, no IOCs. And also 14.5.1, another version that was fixed. And let's take an example. Let's think, okay, from the PC world, what would have been different if in the last 20 years we didn't have local admin? So, for example, once I looked into that, I kind of remember the SolarWinds attack used stage 2 of this attack. They planted the DLL into the C Windows directory, the WinDIR directory. In an alternative universe, an alternative dimension, if we didn't have local admin on Windows, we wouldn't be able to discover SolarWinds attack. That's how bad it is. But we are not in an alternative dimension yet, and we still have local admin on Windows. Also, Microsoft do plan to change that. So just like on mobile, when the mobile vendors basically say, hey, we are doing the job for you. You don't need to worry about security, which is obviously not true. Imagine Microsoft saying that too. So this is why it's really important for us to change that, because I mean, I don't think anyone can fight malware alone. And by having deeper access to these devices, we are able to find more things together. This is how the SolarWinds attack was found, but many other malware over the history of Windows were discovered in a similar way. So this is quite important. And if we take that away from us, I mean, why do we need to even have SOCs in the entire world? There's no need. I mean, Microsoft will do all the work, right? Obviously not. So, but just to get a better understanding. But let's go back to our own dimension and think about mobile attacks in particular. So this is from the 2019 implant teardown by Google Project Zero. And what is said here is that there is no way for a user in iOS to view the process listing, so the implant binary makes no attempt to hide its execution from the system. So it's actually, the malware orders are protected by the sandbox. And as a result of that, the users cannot see them. It's that bad. The malware order simply ran the file from /temp. So this is the file. It's very easy for them. It's very convenient. Nobody actually looks at that. Even if Apple checks that, they will see that this file, I mean, there are many files like that. This structure, it would get lost in the noise and they would never know about it. But really the important thing is this folder is blocked due to sandbox restrictions, and you're not able to access this file at all without running a local privilege escalation. Google were just lucky because they had access to the exploit itself. So they had access to the infection from the web. They found this malware because this payload was so bad in terms of OPSEC that they communicated every minute. They did it unencrypted. So it's a very bad OPSEC, but very amazing exploits. And simply because the attackers didn't care about what's happening post-exploitation. And this really shows how bad it is. Let's take a look at the attack on a journalist of Al Jazeera. And this journalist was attacked by NSO's malware. And here the IOCs are private var DB and private var temp. You cannot access both of them. So if your phone was communicating with NSO servers, you cannot actually take these files and extract them. This actually happened as well. I mentioned to the vendor, hey, this phone is communicating with NSO servers. Their response was, believe it or not, they said, we have no evidence, or we do not, this is not sufficient information for us to know that this phone is compromised. What do you mean? Like, what I'm asking you is to allow me to extract the file system so I can provide you also the implants that they were using. How can you say that based on the device communicating with CNC server that there's no enough evidence that this phone is compromised? So what? You're not going to help me to extract the file system? Okay, so you're actually not interested in discovering the attack. That's what you're saying. Okay, I got that. And this is what we're trying to change because this is not the best way, not for the vendors and not for us smartphone users. Regardless of who this vendor is, it's really applicable to all of them. So just some food for thought. So a lot of missing and confusing mentioning, no reports, no IOCs. Security updates for unsupported devices is actually a great way to know if a vulnerability is actively exploited also on other devices. So you can see that. So if you look at, for example, 12.5.3, which is only available for unsupported devices, you see that they only fix security issues and also in the previous versions. So this is actually a really good way of knowing what the risk is. So if you want to even practice some exploitation techniques, you can look at all the devices that were exploited, and you can realize from that which ones are probably the better vulnerabilities to take a look at. All these examples exist. Why are we still blocked from extracting payloads and analyzing the memory? I mean, what are you going to say, that now moving forward, there are not going to be any more attacks in the wild? It's not so believable, is it? And of course, we are the IOCs. Now let's talk about LPs. Okay, so we do have LPs. We don't care about anything else. That's actually not true. So when you're running LPEs, in order to do extractions, in order to do analysis of devices, there are a lot of disadvantages. For example, you cannot basically share it with anyone, to use it, right? Like you're basically sharing a vulnerability. That's obviously not good. Also, it's only local privilege escalation. I personally don't consider it as too dangerous. You don't want to share just LP chain with people you don't know and trust. And you want to disclose this because you want to do the right thing. You want to make sure that these vulnerabilities are not being used against you, against others. But you have to keep it because you have to keep a potential weakness, to be able to analyze devices. So every time I actually reported an LPE, I regretted that in the future. So do I actually advise not to share LPEs with device vendors? I think until this changes, the only way to analyze devices in a deep way, in a full way, is keeping those LPEs. And that's unfortunate because I actually believe that the platform should fix those vulnerabilities. But we are being forced not to share them with the vendors, not to fix them, to keep these weaknesses open. And that's wrong. That's not how it should be done. I mean, not to white hat, at least, white hat people. I mean, if you're working in a commercial threat actor, you obviously don't care. If you're working for a government, you could probably use it for yourself. But this is actually not the best way to do it. It's also unstable. So let's say this exploit works 7 times out of 10 or 8 times out of 10. What happens in this other 2 or 3 times out of 10? So basically the device reboots. So if you're checking a phone that is compromised by a non-persistent actor and you cause the reboot, you destroy the investigation. You ruin the entire investigation. And the problem is you ruined it while you did everything right. Because this is what is expected from you. They expect you to run local privilege escalations in order to analyze those devices. They also expect you that after you do that you'll report them both the vulnerabilities you found and the vulnerabilities you used in order to do this investigation. That's just odd. And then porting vulnerabilities. So there is a new iOS update or there is a new Android update. You need to port these LPEs into this new version. And the time that it takes you to port this vulnerability could be enough time for the threat actor to realize, hey, this device is not communicating for 2 weeks or 2 months. They trigger the self-destruct option, which we'll talk about shortly. And also the vulnerability can be patched. Or a new mitigation can be released so it can prevent access for multiple weeks or months even. So you're basically being blocked from analyzing devices, the entire file system, etc. And when you're speaking about, vendors that can sell those LPs and extraction tools, the reality is very different than what is being advertised. So first of all, these vendors do not necessarily have LPs for everything like some of them claim they do. And oftentimes, whatever you have public is actually the same thing that they have. The second thing is, whenever they do have something unique, and I only can think of one vendor that has it, they don't necessarily want to sell it to you. They only want to sell it to high-paying government clients, and they want to do it for different purposes. They don't necessarily do it for cybersecurity purposes. They do it for the ability of bypassing the PIN code or bypassing device restrictions. And so these are some of the reasons. And then if you're waiting for fixing the vulnerabilities or if porting it, etc., and it takes too long, then you're basically losing the race and the time bomb can be activated. And as a result of that, you'll not be able to find the malware that was on the device once you started the investigation. And also another problem is you cannot use this at scale. You cannot just take 10,000 devices and run local privilege escalations on them, or 100,000. It doesn't work. It causes reboots. It causes problems. You can get banned from the App Store or the Play Store. It's not worth it. So on one hand, they do not allow you to use it. On the other hand, you have no other choice. So it's really catch-22 here, and it's terrible. It's also unreasonable to request every SOC in the world to hold LPs 0 days. It's just impossible. Why do we have deeper access on every other platform, but we don't have it on smartphones? So just going back into the time bomb, this is a document from the leak of the Pegasus NSO product guidelines. And this leak revealed some of the things, but I want to mention that they have a self-destruct mechanism. So if your phone was compromised and you want to analyze it, the traditional forensics method would be, you need to unplug the computer from the network socket. You need to turn it off. You need to do investigation in a certain way. On mobile, you cannot do that. If you're going to switch the phone off, if you're going to move to airplane mode, and you're going to be like that for, in this case, the default here is 2 months, but you can change the default settings. Then the Pegasus malware would simply self-destruct. So you ruin the investigation by taking the phone offline. How convenient. So, and during that time, it's not like the vendor is going to help you to extract the file system. No, at best, you're going to get a new device, but if you're actually interested in the cyber details, the cyber attack details, and you want to see which other devices in the organization are compromised, you cannot do that. Not easily, and you have to get very creative in there. Some possibilities of inferring the phone is compromised, but to actually get the payload like you're used to from Windows, no, not so easy. So let's talk about common myths. That's really what's repeating again and again in the false advertising of the mobile security space. So the walled garden, this is the most common myth. People think, okay, if I'm not downloading applications from third-party app stores on Android, or if I'm only using the walled garden, then I'm safe. But actually, in reality, it doesn't work like that. If you're concerned about threat actors like NSO, if you're concerned about threat actors like various nation states, they don't care about the App Store. They don't care about the Play Store. They basically use either 0 clicks or 1 clicks. In 1 clicks, and this is also from the Pegasus product datasheet, they say they have 2 types of infection methods. One of them is OTA, over the air. It's a push message, no cooperation or engagement, no indication that it appears on the device. It's silent and invisible and cannot be prevented. Again, because there is only a single layer of defense, which in this case, it's Apple or Google. But if this for some reason is not available, they have a one-click attack. Basically, they send you a link via SMS, via email, or whatnot. As soon as you click on the link, the installation is silent. You don't see it. You don't see anything different on the phone, and your phone is compromised. So really, that's all it takes. Entering a website that is compromised, whether if you did it intentionally or by clicking on a link, or a water hole attack. Let's talk about SRD. SRD is security research devices recently announced by Apple in the last few years. And there is a common myth that SRD will help you in analyzing attacks. It's actually going to only help you if you're looking for vulnerabilities, not for attacks. So just to understand the difference, you have 10,000 devices in the organization, and you have another SRD device. The SRD device is not going to help you to find attacks on these 10,000 devices. if these 10,000 devices, any of them are compromised, you wouldn't be able to access the file system on these devices or the memory, should you want to, and do a deeper investigation. The SRD is going to help you, however, if you want to look for vulnerabilities in the platform itself. But in that case, why do you need SRD? You also have Checkmate. You don't need a separate solution for that. So it doesn't actually help you in digital forensics and incident response investigations. It only helps you to find vulnerabilities, which you don't necessarily need that tool for it. There are other ways. So another myth is SRD devices. It's actually not helping any DFIR or SOCs. And then another myth is users should not be allowed to run elevated code. And let's take a look at Apple's own statements here. And I actually took it from the Epic Games versus Apple trial that is happening this month. We have root access on macOS. And Apple VP of Developer Relations claimed that nobody at Apple say that macOS is less secure than iOS. They also say that iOS and macOS, they allow you to keep the integrity, and they don't think that it's unsafe to use a Mac, and you can run Mac applications worry-free. So wait a minute, if on macOS we have local admin, or specifically a root user, and it's perfectly safe, why we don't have that ability on iOS? Oh, because users will do stupid things. But guess what? Users can do stupid things without local admin. Users can simply install a VPN that turns all the traffic to the attackers. Users can install a fake profile or a rogue profile. Users can install a root certificate. They can, with MDM, you can also wipe a device, and that's dangerous, right? Like, why is that allowed? And don't tell me you want to revoke that too. So really, if we have the same access on macOS, there is no reason we shouldn't be able to have a local admin on iOS. Same with Chromebooks. If we have root on Chromebook, why shouldn't we have root on Android too? And Android is also supposed to be open. It's a bit disappointing, the level of access that we are receiving as users, and that we cannot do all the things we could have done if we had full access to the devices. So what we want to do is we want to change that. And we have announced the last few years the initiative of FreeTheSandbox. FreeTheSandbox is a non-profit initiative, and the goal is to promote open sandbox policy for device owners. So device owners get local admin, and they can do many things, including security analysis, including independent attestation of devices. If the phone is compromised, you can extract the payloads to prevent further misuse. And this could also mean innovation in a way, which we'll talk about in a second. From security perspective, we really need just a few things that will make our lives way, way better. And of course, the best way to do it is to be able to do it at scale. So SOCs around the world can benefit from that and can treat these endpoints that have microphone in the pocket of every employee in the same way they treat Windows PCs. That's how it should be done, and even macOS. So we want to have an administrator or root level user. We need to have read-only access to the entire file system, and also read-only access to the memory. The file system one is for persistent attacks or payloads that are planted in the file system, and the read-only memory access is for non-persistent attacks. So it's actually very beneficial to be able to analyze that, because there are also some of these attacks actively being exploited out there. And the upside here is also that liberated sandbox with local admin can actually lead to a lot of innovation that we cannot even think of. I mean, it can cause things like, I mean, if you look historically, like virtual machines, we wouldn't have virtual machines if there wasn't the option of running a local admin applications on Windows. We would have many of the non-traditional tools that were not ported into mobile yet to be able to be ported there. New types of authentication, new things that we cannot even imagine right now, because there are so many brilliant people in this planet that have so many great ideas for innovation, but they cannot do those on locked and restricted devices. And it's a shame, because these devices are just amazing, right? Like, we have internet access in our pocket, we have cameras, we have everything we wanted. Like, if you talked to me 20 years ago and told me that will be the future, I'll be like, this is amazing. So what can we do? Like, we know, okay, this is a real issue, this is a problem, and if we're not going to do something right now, the same issue is going to exist on PCs very soon, on macOS very soon as well. So we need to convince the vendors that opening the sandbox is actually a net positive for them. And I know vendors are going to watch this presentation. So if there is one thing you need to take from this presentation, is if you open up the sandbox and you actually do it first, you increase your revenues. What? Okay, yes. So if you open up the sandbox, that will allow you to win many more CYOD contracts that you're currently losing. So once you get the CISO stamp in an organization on a specific device model, if they have full access to the device, the SOC can investigate those devices, and those would be the recommended devices for CYOD contracts. Now, CYOD contracts are not necessarily just, one person buying this device at a store. It's thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, and even 100,000 devices at once that are being sold to a specific company. So this is very powerful play that can be done. So if you need to take one thing out of this, yes, there is a problem. Yes, there are many issues. Yes, this is wrong. But you can actually increase your revenues by opening up the sandbox. So if you want to speak to your manager and telling them, hey, there is this great idea, let's do that, this is the way to convince internally a large corporation to do it. And of course, the bonus is that more attacks will get discovered. More attacks will get discovered. More exploits will be found. The platform will be safer, and further abuse of these vulnerabilities will not be possible. So this is really the core of what liberating the sandbox for local users is about. Give the users the option, give the users the choice, give organizations the possibility of really using mobile devices as a productivity tool. Now we are doing it anyway, but because there is no competition, over time, I think it will change if devices are not going to be opened up. This is really something we have to do to make sure the ecosystem is healthier. And of course, this leads to unintended innovation. This can lead to many, many things, depending on how flexible you want to be. But I would go all in on this. I think it's the user's device. They deserve to choose what is running and what permission, and not anyone else. Now, in case we are not able to convince device vendors, there are also policymakers in the room. There are people that can help us change the law. So the bottom line is that mobiles are becoming a significant risk. 3 billion devices out there. Imagine what one rogue actor can do with a full zero-click chain going wild. I mean, they can impact so many different devices out there at once. It's just insane. Like, this is a very big and very real risk. So mobile is becoming a very, very big risk for us. We have to adapt the law to force any device vendor that generates a device with microphone, with camera, and with internet connectivity, they should be providing local admin users for device owners and basically security controls for organizations to be able to use these local admins in order to protect, to analyze and protect these devices. So this is really what's at stake here, and this is what we have to change. Once one country will start it, others will follow, just like the GDPR. So why should we care? Basically, I've warned about mobile attacks in the last decade. I've seen them firsthand so many times. Most of them were never published. This is happening. I'm seeing attacks on journalists. I'm seeing attacks on researchers, on politicians. We are all using one of two devices, either an Android or an iPhone. That's it. We don't have any other choice. And Apple and Microsoft are looking at that and saying, hey, we got away, like they got away with that, or in this case, we got away with that, in case of Apple, with not giving full access to the device. Maybe we can do the same on Windows or Mac OS. And some of the releases, for example, Windows 10X, is actually, they have that, like they disabled access to the Windows folder. They don't have HITB access anymore. So you won't know about some of the things happening on that platform. And that's really the direction things are going to. So we really have to stand up right now and say, hey, this is wrong. We cannot have such a restricted sandbox policy. And there's also, if there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this presentation, it's mobile attacks are way, way, way more common than what we think. And I wish that someday the mobile device vendors will publish the real statistics on this. It's just so much more common than what people think. We need to have the option of choosing what we want to run on these devices. So with that, I'll wrap up. Thank you very much for watching this presentation. This is my email and my Twitter. Get in touch. Yeah, thank you very much.